Nancy, but unfortunately, she won't be joining us for today. But in case she makes it, I think she'll just talk at the end. So today we'll be handling Active Directory pen testing with Collins Wanjohi. So I think we can get started. I think we have enough members in the meeting. So Collins.
Hi guys, good evening.
Hello.
Let me just share my screen.
Okay.
So I'm Collins Wanjohi. Okay. So today we'll be handling Active Directory pen testing. Then, if you could give it a title, is Dominating the Domain. I'm a risk analyst intern at Seriano, a system penetration tester, also a Kamilimu ambassador. Outside of my workplace and computers, I'm a basketball player, a cyclist with a group called Spin Kings, a chess player, and I like either dogs or cats. I don't prefer any. So today we'll be looking at an overview of what Active Directory is, the lab setup I have on my computer, the initial attack vectors for Active Directory pen testing, post-compromise activities, which you do past after you've completed your initial attack, and also mitigation strategies. A good write-up always has the mitigation strategies for your client or your users. Just a moment. Active Directory is basically a directory service to manage Windows domain networks. So the domain will have resources or objects, which are either computers, printers, users. So you can think of it as a Yellow Pages phone book. So it says, this computer is at this IP address, it has this MAC address, and so forth. A resource will either authenticate with the Kerberos tickets, which is what is preferred, or other non-Windows devices can authenticate using Radius and LDAP. We'll talk more on LDAP later in the attack vectors. So we have Active Directory components. Active Directory, you can think of it as there's the physical side and the logical side. So on the physical side, you've got the domain controller and a data store. So the domain controller hosts the copy of the directory store, which is the phone book, which we were saying. Sorry for that. Just a moment. So that will be muted. So on the data store, it's you can think of it as a DB file in a web application. So that stores the directory info for the users, the service, and the applications on the domain. Cool guys, mute tafadhali. Yeah. So on the data store, it's stored as an ntds.dit file. It's sort of a long name, but the DIT stands for Directory Information Tree. The other one is New Technology Directory Services. So you can think of it as a basically it's the web, it's the DB file for a web application, the way you've got a .SQL. this is the same as that. So it's stored on the system root NTDS folder of all domain controllers. The system root is just /Windows. The NTDS acts as a database for the Active Directory and stores the data, including all the credentials of the users and the services on the Active Directory. For the logical components, we have, excuse, could everyone just mute the mics because I'm having static on my side.
Okay, just a moment, Colin. Lavender, please, can you mute? Okay. Okay, you can continue.
So on the logical side, we've got a schema. The logical components are more about 7, but it's what you need to know is a schema, which you declares how you can declare an object and how you can configure an object. So that says you can say this is a cat. For a cat, it has 4 legs, it has 2 ears, it has 2 eyes, so sort of the thing. So for all resources in the schema, you declare the object and its attributes. The objects are put inside OUs. OUs are organizational units, such as the users, computers, groups, printers, shared folders. All those are held in organization units. So they are a collection of objects. So all users are in one OU. All network printers are in the same OU. All groups, you can have the domain admins, the normal users, they are all in a different OU. And we've got trusts. So trusts are how two domains the relationship between two domains. So it can either be directional, which is sort of, I trust, so domain A trusts domain B, but not the other way. And then there's transitive. So for transitive trust, it's domain A trusts domain B, and domain B trusts C and D and E. So A, because I trust B, I trust everything that B trusts. So it's sort of what did I say? The word is, I don't have it in my head right now, but it's because I trust you, I trust everyone you trust. Those are the transitive trusts. A domain is a group to manage objects in the organization. So it has administrative boundaries, which is to say the domain contains all these users. Replication to when you want to push updates to other domain controllers. That's the work of the domain. And authorization and authentication of users and services into the domain. A tree is a hierarchy of domains. So several domains, like subdomains, like what you'll have on, let's say an organization has the HR department, research and development, the technical guys. So all those are subdomains. Then the whole organization is the tree. Then you can have a forest. If the organization has like branches, they each are trees, the organizations, then the branches of like a bank, then the whole thing is the forest. So this is my setup for what I had to do the pen testing. It's a simple setup. I've only got one domain controller, and two machines in the domain. So you can see the names of the domain computers. It's Punisher and Spider-Man, and the server is server 1. And you on the right there, you can see the users in the domain that I created. And if you look closely for the SQL service, that's a service in the domain. And I've put the description there. My password is password123 // and that you'll see that somewhere else when you're retrieving data from the domain. when you're extracting data from the domain. So assumptions for my lab is that you have a compromised user or a shell on the machine. So it's either you've done your initial attack, like basic system pen testing. So you've come into the AD with a compromised user or a shell on one of the machines in the domain, and that Windows Defender is turned off. You can check out some blogs that do AV that take that can describe how you can turn off Windows Defender, or you can have your payloads and exploits have an AV bypass feature. And also you set up file share. The way you can, on Windows, you can right click a file and say share. That ensures that the ports 135 and 449 are open. So for initial attack vectors, you can have user enumeration, NetBIOS, LLMNR, name poisoning, SMB relay attacks, Kerberos. Kerberos, there are a couple of attacks. There is Kerberosting, there is AS rep roasting, and the other one I can't remember. But over here, I've just tackled Kerberosting. And then there is IPv6 and LDAPs attacks. For user enumeration, it's you've done your initial reconnaissance on the organization. You've got a list of possible users that you can have gotten it from your OSINT. You've looked through their LinkedIn's. You've gotten a look at how they are naming their users on the domain. Let's say it's first name initial, then last name like D, Wandia, or J, Ochieng, something like that. So for that, you can try to get valid usernames on the domain using Kerberos. Kerberos is a tool on Linux. And just down there, you can see that it's tested the 11 usernames in my, you'll put the possible users into a text file, then pass it on to Kerberos. So Kerberos enumerates the users and it tells you it's tested 11 and only 5 are valid. Then with that, now that you have valid usernames, you can use that for hash retrieval. You can retrieve the hashes, but this only will work if their pre-authentication, the user pre-authentication is disabled. On Active Directory, it comes default enabled, but if there is misconfiguration on that point, you can use that to retrieve their hashes, and a rep roasting attack with Rubius. So as you can see on the picture down there, that's hash retrieval for the, I had one user, I had disabled their pre-authentication, PPACA. So you can see, so you can see that we've retrieved the hash and we can crack it offline. The others, it says, doesn't have, UF don't require pre-auth set. So don't require pre-auth set, that's disabling pre-auth. That's what it means. For LLMNR, name poisoning is when you're getting into a network or a domain, you can, there's the way you backslash 2 times, then type in the IP address you want to see what file shares they have. So LLMNR is used to identify a host when DNS fails to identify them. And the main flaw is that it utilizes the username and their NTLM v2 hash when they responded to, when it responds to a wrong domain name. So what I did was you just run responder on your attacker machine, usually Kali, because I was using Kali. So you will run responder with the command up there. It says the interface I want is Ethernet 0, then you listen for events, and the V is for verbose. Show me the hashes that you retrieve. So after you've run this on the attacker machine, if you've got the victim machine on the other side, you'll just point it to the name address, to the IP address of your attacker machine. So mine was 64. So the attacker machine was 64. So I went into the victim machine and just backslash pale juu kwa file explorer. You can backslash 192.168.164 and it will drop the hash of any of the users that are logged in currently. And you can crack that. If it's easy, I used ROQ with hashcat and it came back with password 1. So SMB really attacks, instead of you having to crack the path, the hash from the LLMNR name poisoning, you can just pass it on. So really attacks are, you get the hash, you retrieve the hash, instead of cracking, you pass it on to other computers on the domain and see which one will authenticate you in. So requirements are that SMB signing must be disabled on the domain computers, and also the relayed credentials must be admin on the machine. So they must have local admin on that side. So that's the only way that you can relay them to other computers. For this, I don't have the attack photos because I was running it locally, so I couldn't hold. You'll need to have several computers on the domain that are running so you can relay the hash to them. So I only had one computer running, but these are the commands you'll need. So responder listens for the events, but you'll have SMB and HTTP turned off on responder so that it doesn't return the hashes. Then you'll use NTLM relay to relay the hashes. Most of these two, responder and NTLM relay X, are tools from Impacket. Impacket is sort of a conglomeration of Python tools for attacks. The LDAPS attacks, these are the IPv6, the lightweight directory access protocol. So if it's unsecure, it's LDAP. If it's secure, it uses encryption for data in transit. And so it's LDAPs. It's a protocol that queries and modifies the directory services running over TCP/IP. So anytime a user wants to authenticate, there is traffic sent over the TCP/IP. And most computers usually have IPv6 enabled, but don't use IPv6 for internet traffic. So we can impersonate an IPv6 DNS server. You can tell them, you're sending me an IP address that's IPv6, I can handle that. So what we are looking at mostly, what the key configuration that we'll need is that we attack is the WPAD. WPAD is web proxy auto discovery. So you can see there's a pointer on the commands I have wh fake wpad.marvel.local. So what web proxy auto discovery means is that any computer that is logging into, that is rebooting or booting up into the domain, they'll ask if it will auto discover any web proxies in the domain so it can join. And at the point that it asks for that, you'll tell it you can authenticate using IPv6. So the user will send their credentials through IPv6 to the attacker machine because we impersonated the DNS server for IPv6 traffic. And as you run the attack, so MITM6 will impersonate the DNS server. Then NTLM relay will capture the credentials from the victim and relay them to the .44 is the domain controller. So it will relay that to that for authentication. And this attack usually creates a new user into the computer. So you can use that new user that it creates for lateral movement and persistence. This is what I got if you look at the command on NTLM relay, I added a tag L, loot me. So after it's authenticated successfully, it will create a loot me directory and drop everything that it can get from the domain. So those are the domain users file, the domain groups file, the domain admins file, and that is what is shown here. And if you remember when I was showing you the lab setup, we had SQL service which we had set up its description as my password is my password 123 backslash. So you can see that we capture that with the LDAPS attack. And that's why you do not need to put your confidential information on the descriptions as you create the users in an Active Directory. So there are other initial vectors that you can take, and I have not quite exhausted them all, but we'll move on to post-compromise activities. So here you either going for enumeration to gather more information about the domain and any subdomains that are there, or you're attacking it to either escalate your privileges or going for persistence in the domain. So the tools used here are PowerView and Bloodhound. These tools are quite extensive in what they do, but I do not want to go deep into them. But PowerView will enumerate the domain controller, the policies and the users and the groups, everything. And it can show you that when you're running it. Then Bloodhound visualizes that in sort of a graph. I think I'll show you that at the end. So attacks for the post-compromise, you can pass the hash. The hash that you got earlier, instead of tracking it offline, you can just go and you can just pass it on to other computers in the domain to try your luck with authentication. And as you can see in the top, the pass the hash attack, in the photo there, I'm using crackmap exec, and it's set with a local auth switch. So the local auth will authenticate for local authentication, basically. So it's not authentication into the domain. It's what you have, like a computer that is not on the domain, but you're trying to leverage the fact that most likely the user John Doe has reused their password for the local account. They've reused it for the domain account. So that's what you're looking at that's what you're targeting when you put in local auth switch. For the password, if you cracked the hash in the previous attacks, you can just pass that password into all the computers in the domain. So that's why you run with a CIDR notation on the password, pass the password. And that one also drops the sum table, which is hashes of the users in the computer. You can try password spraying on local accounts and machines, since they do not usually have account lockout policies. So for domain accounts, you'll either have 3 tries, and if you don't have the password, it will lock you out. But for local accounts, that's not the case. So you can try spray your password over there with a local auth switch and try your luck. Also, when you've got the weak password of John Doe, you can just put that in with secrets dump, and that dumps the sum table, the LSA table, and there's another table I can't remember. So the sum table contains the hashes of the domain users. The LSA table, LSA is local security authority. So that it runs the local account authentications. So when you get that, you can use those hashes for more attacks and other vectors. Also, there is token impersonation. So you can think of this as web cookies in web applications. They allow for system logging in without providing credentials every time. So when you've logged into a website the first time, if you refresh the page, you don't have to log in again. So that's how tokens work. And tokens are live until the computer reboots or shuts down. So there are two types of tokens. There is delegate tokens. You can check out the photo I have there. There is delegate tokens. Those are used for the logging in, and then there is for the users. And then they're created when the user logs in. And then there is impersonate tokens. You can see that we have no token available. So impersonate tokens are for non-interactive events like attaching a network drive. The drive is given a token for the domain. And as you can see at the end there, I was, just a moment. So at the end there, I was marveled at, I was the administrator on the, as administrator, as the local service, as the NT authority. Then you can impersonate the token of CMarvel because it's available and your CMarvel, and this is a Metapreter session. So you'll be running on Metasploit. Then there is Kabarosting. So Kabarosting is attacking a service in a light way. So you get the ticket granting service ticket of the service. It's not server, it's service. And then you try crack it. So for this, I was using get user SPN. So it's a tool also on Impacket. Impacket, the full combination of the tools. So you'll just put in your domain name, the domain, the name of the user, and their password, and then give it the domain controller's IP. And then you request for a TGS from them. And as you can see, it returns for the SQL service. It returns the hash and TGS for the SQL service. This you can take offline and crack it for if you want to use that into other attacks. Then there's the GPP or C password attack. So group policy preferences. For this, it's not that common nowadays because it was only on Windows Server 2012, but then you might run into a Windows Server 2012 running as DC somewhere. So the main flaw is that they use a C password format. The credentials are encrypted, then stored in a C password. But this format type, the encryption format was accidentally released. So you can encrypt that offline using the C password that you can download from the internet. You can get it anywhere. So you can use Metasploit instead of attacking. You can just enumerate if the computer has this flow active, and you just enumerate it, and you can put it in as into the write-up after the engagement. So then there is silver ticket and golden ticket attacks. So silver ticket is sort of a downgrade of the golden ticket. So for the silver ticket, you gain only one service. So you are attacking only one service. So you'll get the TGS ticket to one service, then you can using that TGS, you can gain access to only that service, because Kerberos allows services to authenticate without double checking if the token is actually valid. For the golden ticket, you'll get the hash of the TGT account, the Kerberos TGT account, and that gives you full access to all resources and the accounts on the domain. So that is gaining. That's like everything on the domain. You can run anything that you want. And we've got sort of something that is, and here we've got the golden ticket attack in play. So first you'll run mimikatz on the target machine, or you can run, I saw Amarjit, he was running on Covenant while still on the attack machine. So when you're on mimikatz, you just dump the hash of the KDR TGT account, and also you'll need the SID, which is just below. You can see the LSA dump, LSA command. Just below that, you have domain Marvel, then /S15, that whole number from S to the end. That's the security identifier of the account. So that is what you'll need to create the golden ticket. Then it gives you the NTLM hash of the account also. Then with that, you can just tell Mimikatz to create your golden ticket, a Kerberos golden ticket for the administrator user. For the administrator user for this domain. And here you'll use the SID. It requires the SID of the domain, the hash of the KDR TGT account. Then you'll also add in the ID, the RID of the administrator, which is usually 500, and then /PPT, which is just pass the ticket into the current session. That means, so if I've got the ticket, I've got access to all the resources on the domain. And at the end there, you can see like 3 lines from the end. Golden ticket for administrator at Marvel.local, successfully submitted for current session. From that, you can just run command prompt from Mimikatz. And that's this part here. So at the first, after I've run just miscellaneous command on Mimikatz on the left, the top CMD page, I asked the host name and it returned server1.pc, server1 PC. Then you'll run psexec to go into any other computer in the domain. So you'll just run psexec, the name of the computer in the domain, and what application you want to run. So I ran CMD, and then you can ask CMD in the next red line. You can see I've asked CMD to tell me what's my host name, and that's Punisher. And if I had any other computers on the domain, I could just pass them into psexec, and that just is easy lateral movement for you using the golden ticket that was created. So mitigation strategies. First and foremost is security patching and system updates. This should not be something that has to be talked about, because it should be like ABC. If any patch has been released, you should at least have updated it by end of day. And also the password policy. The problem with password policy is guys want convenience, something they can remember, instead of security, what the password is actually meant for. So you can limit common words. Most of the dictionaries that are used for password spraying are English words. I'm thinking you can also use, for your passwords, you can use your vernacular language, because only you will know it, or very few people know it. And also you can put in, like, instead of what you're used to, the letter E is replaced by number 3, letter capital A is replaced with letter 4, with number 4. You can change that into, like, use several symbols to represent one letter. So it increases your password length, and it also it increases the complexity of the password, and also limit reuse of passwords, because for there was the SMB really attack. If the local admin had not reused their password also for the domain account, we could not have gotten through that way. So that's one thing. That's another thing you can look into for password policies. For the LLMNR, it's recommended you disable LMNR, but if that's not possible, you can just require network access control, where you authenticate against the MAC address instead of authenticating against only the IP address of the when a user wants to access a resource. For SMB relay attacks, you can always enable SMB signing, and remember, don't disable pre-authentication. That comes default, but you can check it to make sure. And also disable NTLM. So there's NTLM and there's NTLM v2. So NTLM, you can crack it or pass it in the hash attacks. You can't pass NTLM v2 hashes. That's one thing. And also local admin restriction. If there is the service accounts or local admins, you should use least privilege for them, for admins in the domain, so that you don't have much of that lateral movement using the same account. For the LDAPs attacks, you can just block IPv6 because that's easy. No one's using IPv6 currently. You can just block that traffic. Don't disable it, you just block it. Tell it that if there's any IPv6 traffic, just drop those packets. For the Cabra hosting and also for the silver ticket, the service account should not be domain admins. That's the ideal situation. If you can't go past that, you actually have to have a service account as a local admin. You'll have to check up on the password policies of the account and all that stuff. The resources I used for the lab setup guide, I was using Amarjit's write-up from MacroSec. There's a host more attack vectors and popular attacks by Gabriel on the link here. And also for PowerView, which I didn't show most of it, but PowerView was the one that enumerates everything in the domain: the users, computers, resources, shared printers, shared files, shared directories, everything. And also there's a Pentest mind map. So the mind map has more, also just like the write-up by Gabriel, the mind map it lists everything for, I think I can open it. Here it is. So this is the mind map. It tells you at the top there, it says you have no credentials for the domain. You scan the network, find the DIP, all that stuff, and it goes on. And every line that you see here is a Linux command that you can run to do what it says. Then there's all this. Then when you gain domain admin at the middle here, you can see you just dump the NTDS. You have the whole domain in one file. That's the NTDS file. Yeah. Any questions and clarifications?
Thanks so much, Collins, for the presentation. There was already one question in the chat. Let me. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, a question from Emily. Can one use PowerView to review GPOs, or rather? Oh, I keep losing it. Just a moment. Can one use Power? Oh, you have seen it?
Yeah. So
okay, maybe.
Also the GPOs are there's I don't have my computers running, my VMs, but I had, you can enumerate GPOs from. Can you still see my screen? It's on Kali.
No, we are seeing the presentation.
The presentation. I think I'll have to reshare the screen. But you can enumerate all the GPUs of the domain using PowerView.
Okay, thank you. Hope Emily you got that. If you have any more question, you can just ask. Or let me give you members the permission to unmute, and if you have a question, you can just unmute and ask. I've also shared the slides in the Sharks Telegram group, and I've also shared the Telegram link. Actually, let me reshare the people who missed it.
I've also seen a question from Trevor. Any experience with cross-forest attacks?
Just a moment, I don't know. Who is that?
So I don't have any experience with cross-forest attacks. I'm pretty new. I'd say intermediate with AD Pentesting. So this session for me was I learned from you guys and you learned from me. So I'll check out cross-forest attacks. Thank you, Trevor.
Hi, Collins. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Amajit?
Very well, very well. Thank you for the presentation. Maybe something I can add to one of the things you had mentioned on the golden and silver ticket attacks. You
Yeah.
can actually leverage the same attacks on a Linux machine without necessarily using Mimikatz. So there's a tool called ticketer.py. It's part of the Impacket toolset. So you can actually use that to create silver tickets and golden tickets. So check it out if you haven't.
Thank you. I'll look into it also. If there's something you didn't get right or you didn't hear correctly, you can just ask.
Someone asked if you have any experience with cross-forest attacks. I don't know if you answered that already.
Yeah, from Trevor, I did answer that. I do not have experience with that, but I'll look into it. This is a learning for me also.
Pauline asks you to talk about preventing disabling Windows Defender.
You can, there is write-ups on disabling Windows Defender, but when you have access, you have the initial access into a computer, you can, there's tools to do that for you. Or instead of disabling it on its side, you can. I did answer that. I do not have experience with that, but I'll look into it. This is a learning. I'm hearing myself. So it's either you disable on the victim machine, or you can run exploits and payloads that have code obfuscation or AV bypass techniques. So antivirus bypass techniques that will help with the exploits not being detected by Windows Defender or the antivirus running on the other side. I do not have like concrete blogs that I've gone through for the Windows Defender currently, but you can check it out by Google.
Maybe if I can chime in, Collins, to assist you with that one for disabling Windows Defender. Okay. There's not much one can do to like protect, but what you can do is detect activities that would now go and disable Defender. So if you have log monitoring enabled on your endpoints and you have something like a SIM, you can set up rules that if a certain, like the way you said, there might be a PowerShell command that you can use if you're running at administrator level, you can run the set MP preference disable real-time monitoring true command. But now if you're monitoring such commands being run on a machine, yes, you will not protect it from being disabled, but you will actually get some telemetry about such activity happening. So as a defender, you can then now action knowing that some malicious activity is happening in your domain. I hope that helps answer your question, Pauline.
Also, if you guys can check it out, there was a post on Twitter that said, if you run your exploit twice, Windows Defender recognizes the first time and disables it. Then if you run it again, it might go through. I don't have the actual link, but you can check it out. It was on Twitter.
That was by a guy called Flangvik, but Microsoft have already patched that.
Oh, okay.
Do we have any more questions, guys? If there's something you didn't understand, maybe you can just unmute or ask in the chat. Okay, maybe as we wind up, I would like to, well, I can see we have Jackie Ayeba in the chat. Jackie, maybe you can just unmute and say something before we close.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. The session has been extremely informative, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for it.
Awesome. We are glad to have you in the meeting.
Asante sana.
Okay.
Hi, Nancy. Would you like to make a few closing remarks? Oh, it's okay. Nancy's on the road, so Tony will make the closing remarks tonight.
Okay. Thanks so much, guys, for joining. Today we had the campus sessions. As usual, it's Tuesday. Then on Thursday we'll have the community sessions. For those who are interested with today's slides, you can just join the SHIACS Telegram channel. I've shared the link. I think let me just share it once more for those who have missed it. Yeah, so you can just join the Telegram channel. I'll send the links there. So thanks so much for joining, and let's meet on Thursday. So have a good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you all so much for attending. And thank you so much to our guest. It was a very informative session, and thanks so much for coming on time and waiting for everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. Good night.
Good night.